All right, good afternoon. Oh, that's loud. Good afternoon, everyone. As we begin this meeting, I'll ask everyone to please silence cell phones and other electronic devices and remind council that our procedure by law prescribes the use of technology during council meetings. It is, I don't know what time it is. It is 5 o'clock. I'll call this meeting to order. The Municipality of Brighton Council respectfully acknowledges that we are meeting on the shared treaty and traditional territories of the Mississauga, also known as the Mississauga Anishinaabe, and the Williams Treaty First Nations. The lands and waters that make up our municipality have been and continue to be the collective responsibility of these Indigenous communities, who have been their stewards and caretakers for generations. We recognize that this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across the region and Canada. We honor their enduring connection to this land and their significant contributions to its history and culture. As we gather here today, we are reminded of the importance of reconciliation and the need to respect and learn from the Indigenous peoples and their knowledge keepers who have lived in harmony with this land long before settlers arrived. Let us reflect on our shared responsibility to foster relationships built on mutual respect and understanding, and to work together towards creating a more just and equitable society for all. And on this National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, I will ask that we take a moment of silence to honor those who did not return home from residential schools and those who had and have enduring and generational trauma from the experience imposed on them by the residential and industrial school system. Thank you. Today, many of us were able to gather with Indigenous partners in Alderville and march together, showing that we want to hear and understand the truths about the tragic legacy of residential schools. We're also flying the Every Child Matters flag at the municipal center, which helps remind us of our responsibility to ensure that the voices of Indigenous children and families are heard and respected. Today in Alderville, we heard that it was an attempt at education that got us here, and it is with education that we will get through this together. And so we continue to work together to deepen our cultural understanding and actively promote diversity, inclusion, and the fight against racism. As we continue our path toward reconciliation, let's work together to honor the past and create a brighter future for all. I know there's no announcements at special meetings, but I felt that that was important, and I feel that this next thing is important too. For the last 4 days, we have celebrated an incredible 50th anniversary of Applefest, and I saw nothing but good, big, bright smiles in downtown and at the Children's Village and at the car show. Lots of camaraderie at the ecumenical service on Thursday. I heard someone won some money at bingo on Friday. It was a good weekend, filled with lots of happy Brighton moments. So I want to thank the Applefest committee. I have thanked the chair and her committee, our staff, in particular, Carol Ann Birch, who has been, I think, 24/7 for the last month or so on this. So we really appreciate the work that went into this from a staffing perspective, and it was all hands on deck. I was very pleased to see everyone working hard and having fun at the same time at Applefest, and of course to the volunteers who helped sort and order, and special thanks to the fire department who turned me upside down on a backboard. They turned me upside down on a backboard after extricating me from the vehicle. Yeah. There's pictures. I have a motion moved by Councillor Freda, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that Council approve the September 30th, 2024 special council meeting agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. I will note that we have received regrets from Councillor Wright, and I also note that Councillor Butwell is not with us this evening either. Members of council, have you any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. There are none noted. The topic for this afternoon's special council meeting is to hear from our consulting engineer, J.L. Richards, planner's presentation regarding the construction plan for the Brighton wastewater treatment upgrades. To whom do I turn the floor over? CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Matt and Susan have been here before. I don't really think they need an introduction. They're going to go through their presentation. Just so council is aware, our intent is for them to go through the presentation. You can ask questions. They'll speak to some of the optional items and the costs associated. And then staff will come back with a report on the 15th for potentially further direction from council. So today is really just for information, but Matt and Susan are both here to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, CAO. So Matt, Susan, J.L. Richards, both, please.
Thank you very much for having us. So we were going to provide a bit of an update to council. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, Matt, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt to say that Councillor Butwell has entered the chamber at 5:06 p.m. So back to you, sir.
Okay. So we've here to provide a bit of an update to council to make sure that everybody's informed on progress and where we're kind of headed. If you want to go to the next slide, please. We can. There we go. Just a bit of an agenda. We're going to provide a project status update of some of the things we've been working on since we've been here and provided an update. Go over some of the opinion and probable costs that have been put together at the 30% stage. Talk a bit about the future proofing that we're building into the design to hopefully help Brighton move forward beyond this current upgrade, and then an update on the project schedule and where we're going from there. Go to the next slide, please.
So okay. Sorry, apologize for that. So since we were here last time, we have submitted the 30% design package that includes the design drawings, the opinion of probable cost, as well as the design report to the municipality, as well as the Ministry of Environment Conservation Parks on June 27th, 2024. And now J.L. Richards is proceeding with the detailed design to the 66% completion, and it's well underway. And ever since then, we've been meeting with the ministry and municipality on a monthly basis, so then the ministry can be kept up to date in terms of the progress made to date. And a few things we would like to note since June is that we've consulted with the Ministry Permissions and Approvals Branch, and they are generally on board with the proposed design. With a few changes, one of them is the updated effluent criteria. So we've been meeting with them, and they are now aware that we're proceeding with the extended aeration plant design concept. And one of the ways that they look at effluent criteria is based on technology. So because we're moving away from a lagoon-based system into a full mechanical plant, they're looking to lower the effluent criteria, and one of which is the design objectives. So design objectives are typically tied to the type of treatment. So we are looking at lowering that objectives. However, in consultation with the ministry, we were questioning about the compliance limit. So what we have decided on is that we're going to keep the compliance limit, particularly related to ammonia. And then they have a 3-year condition that they will put into the ECA. So after 3 years of plant being full operation, they will monitor the performance. And at that point, they will decide on the compliance limits. Again, compliance limits is something that so the plant has to meet on the normal operating conditions, whereas the design objectives is what the technology itself can achieve. So there's a bit of a buffer between that. And then another aspect that we looked at is to relocate the sampling location. So move away from the current effluent chamber to be a bit more closer to the current plant location. And on top of that, we're having an ongoing conversation with the ministry on the solids treatment. Again, we're not looking at fundamentally changing it. It's just they're looking for a bit more information on our design concept. Next slide, please. So this slide shows you the overall site rendering. Again, this is as updated as last week. I'm going to kind of walk you through the different functions of the site so you're a bit more familiar with the different areas that we'll be talking about. At the bottom left of the page, you'll see there's an administration building that's immediately north of the current faculty lagoon. And then in that same area, you see there is a septic receiving building as well as septic receiving tanks. And then in between the building and the tanks are the sewage pumping station. So that's where all the sewage is going to get pumped from the Harbor Street pumping station as well as the gravity sewer. So all the sewage will then get pumped into the headworks building, which is on the kind of the north side of the site there. So in that building, there will be screening process as well as grit channels on the outside of that building. And following that, the flow will go into the aeration tanks, followed by the clarifiers, which are the empty tanks that you see in the middle. And then the flow will then proceed into the UV disinfection process. And then from that point on, it will connect to the plant outfall that discharges into the wetland. And to the east of the clarifiers, you'll see there's a process building. That's where all the major equipment, for example, the blowers, the sludge pumps, and all the chemical systems will be housed in.
Next slide, if you can. So the next thing we want to, can I go? So the next aspect that we wanted to review is the opinion of probable cost. As we move through this process, we wanted to bring council up to speed on where things have gone. So originally under the design concept from December of 2023, we were sitting at about 28.8 million. As you can see from the slide, having completed the 30% design and gone into more detail, costs have increased to 36.8. We wanted to kind of give council a bit of an update of some of those main drivers that we're seeing in the industry and that are occurring through this project. So I'm going to review kind of these four main ones. We also have some slides that talk about the individual pieces, but so the main drivers here, big one being inflation and increased costs of equipment supply. We're seeing quite a large increase in a lot of equipment, upwards of 40 to 50% over the last eight months or so. We're seeing significant increases in those costs. I can't say to the driver necessarily of that. It's more of an economic thing. The allocation of space for future expansion. So originally when we had done the concept, we were looking at just the design for the current treated capacity. We've now tried to make sure that we build in space for larger areas, and we're going to go through a bit of some of the future proofing that we're looking at and that we've designed into the plant right now. Some of the refinements of some of the scopes that we've had, whether it's things like in consultation with Hydro, we now, in order to provide enough power for the site, we have to buy a large transformer to be able to provide that power, whereas before we were under the assumption that Hydro would provide that. It's just one of those things as you work through them and as you work through the design, these types of things happen. Some of the indoor and outdoor installations and how some of the preferences and operational aspects as we work through with staff, as well as the administration functions. We've tried to refine that down and working with staff to dictate what areas and what spaces they need. So those are the four main, and then the last one is the geotechnical and hydrogeological results. So previously we did not have that for the site. We've since completed that as part of, with the 30% design, identifying some areas for rock anchors in order to hold these things down to the rock and it doesn't float with the water table and where it is, the dewatering requirements that we're going to have in order to build this facility and things like that, that until we get these physical field information, we don't know the ins and outs of those details. So those are the four main drivers. And maybe if you want to go to the next slide, please. We've also broken this down by the individual component of each of the plant and tried to provide a bit of a cost comparison of where the costs have changed. And then trying to provide some drivers to the municipality of where things have gone and why. So each one of these, like I said, a lot of them I've kind of reviewed, but influent pumping station has increased. A lot of these costs have increased. So septage, originally we just had a tank. We have more pre-screening in there, things like that. Headworks, again, a bit of future proofing, as well as costs. For instance, the screens of since October, November, December, when we were looking at costing for that, has almost doubled in cost for the screens. It's just one of those things that we continuously try and get updates on, but it's hard to put your finger on it a little bit sometimes. So I'm kind of working through these different ones. A lot of them, equipment costs have gone up. Future proofing, we're adding different pieces to try and facilitate an expansion in the future. Next slide, please. And again, kind of working through some of the different pieces. So the water stabilization and flow equalization, administration building, and then the electrical servicing and Arena Creek. So like we said, kind of coming in here and trying to show the difference between the 28.8 that we originally had and the 36.8. Next slide, please. So the other aspect that we wanted to talk to council about, and understanding that budgets are hard things to balance, is trying to develop a plan here that we can provide the municipality with enough flexibility to try and mitigate these cost increases as they continue. So we're going to be putting in, and we're working towards this, putting in 4 main provisional items that have significant cost implications. So each one of these is detailed here. And maybe if you want to go to the next slide. The way we've kind of divided this up is into twofold. One is the core scope, which is basically the treatment plant and what we need in order to be able to provide treatment for sewage working through this. The other ones are provisional items that aren't necessarily required. They do add value to what operations staff may do, or septage receiving, or other aspects, but could be cut out in order to facilitate a budget constraint. So the core scope here, as you can see, is currently sitting at 28.9 million. And then the provisional items, so septage receiving at 1.7, the headworks at 4.5 million, the administration building at 1.8 million, and then the WAS Supernate pumping station could all be pulled out. The cost of just under $1 million. So all totaling those of about 8.8 million in provisional items. So the intent is to put those to the industry, have them price that out, and then we'll have them put in costs for these, and then we'll be able to bring it back to council and make a decision at that point of what the budget and what scopes of work that we want to proceed with. So Susan's going to talk a little bit about future proofing here.
So I'm going to walk you through kind of the future proofing design that we have incorporated into our 66% package. So the first item I'm going to talk about is the kind of the core process, which is the aeration tank and the secondary clarifier. So the shaded areas are the kind of the future tanks, and those are the space that we have allocated for the next expansion up to 6,000 cubic meters per day. Again, we have space allocated for those based on the current site layout. Next slide, please. And this is a rendering of the headworks building. So what we have decided to do here is to build a kind of a spare channel, which is the kind of where the shape is currently over. That's the spare channel for the future screening. So currently we have one screen that's sitting in the middle of that room there. That's an inclined auger screen. So that's going to be the active screen for this expansion. And then for the next planned expansion, the plan is to put in additional screen in that spare channel to get to the 6,000 cubic meters per day flow capacity. Next slide, please. So this is the main process building where a lot of the major equipment is being housed in. So the middle section is where the blowers will be sitting. And you can see there are 2 blowers kind of sitting side by side in the middle of that room. So those are for the current capacity. And then there is a pad that's currently where the future blower is pointed at. That's the pad for the future blower to be able to supply the air for that additional aeration tank. And also there is electrical room kind of in the bottom corner of this page here. So that's the main electrical room that's going to house all the panels that powers the rest of the plant, as well as the major equipment that's in this building. Again, there's wall space available that we're gonna be able to accommodate any future loads to the plant. So this is the basement of the process building where the sludge pumps will be housed in. And then currently there are 4 sludge pumps sitting in that corner, and we have space allocated for a 5th future sludge pump. So this is the UV disinfection building. Similar to the Headworks building, we have 1 active channel for the UV disinfection equipment. So those are the banks that sits in the channel that's submerged, and we have allocated space for a spare channel kind of on the bottom side of that room for future additions, and as well as that there's future effluent weir. So that's a hydraulic device that controls the level within the UV channels as well as the flow measurements. So that's all accounted for in terms of that backup channel for the future. And also on the top corner here, that's the electrical room, and you've seen that there's some space there allocated for future panels. And this slide here just shows the rendering of the administration building, again, in consultation with staff. This is the layout that we have come up with. Okay, so in terms of the schedule updates, so we submitted the 30% design back in June, and then we're well underway for the 66% design submission by end of October. We will be submitting for building permits application by end of this year with ECA, that's Environmental Compliance Approval Application with the ministry in January 2025. And then we'll proceed with submitting 100% design by February, and then be in the position to tender this project in February and close the tender by end of March. And construction start will be in the spring of next year. And that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you both. Before I go on to questions of clarification, I will just, because Councillor Butwell wasn't here when the CAO made her remarks, note that this is just a presentation for information. Staff will be bringing a report on the 15th of October with a recommendation or recommendations for us to consider. Just an FYI for you. Councillor Wielden.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Love all of the future proofing. My whole approach is what can we build today that we don't have to build tomorrow? So I love that. Based just on my layperson's looking at the number of tanks in this scenario, it looks like we're going to be able to add 1 more on either side. At what point would we need to add that capacity based on our growth pattern? And how far into the future does this future proofing take us?
I was going to say, I know we, during the EA process, we did look at this, and the original 4,600 was to take us to 20 years, but I know things have changed a lot since then. And maybe I ask Paul a little bit to comment on some of that in terms of future proofing. I mean, we're trying to build to that 6,000 is kind of that number that we're looking at. There's a lot of pieces to still do for that, but.
Sure, and maybe I'll bring Leslie in on this as well. He's been crunching some numbers, but the original numbers that we reported to council on was looking at a 3-year average flow rate, wastewater flow rate. Jail Richards has suggested maybe using the 5-year rate that brings in a flood year, so the per capita flow rate is higher. So I think we're at 3,770 cubes out of our 4,600 certified. So that's about, someone can correct me on the actual housing numbers there, but that's about, I'm guessing about 5 years worth of development permits that we can work out. It was 8 years, but if I'm with the number of registered plans of subdivision, I think our number of building permits are going to go up per year, and so I'm going to think it's about 5 years.
Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair, thank you. So Mr. Walsh, if I understand you correctly, we're using a current number average throughput of 3,800 M3, which is roughly equivalent to the number of homes we have on the system now. So if I simply extrapolate the arithmetic from 3,800 to 4,600 kind of suggests that we can build maybe 800 homes in 5 years. Is that kind of what I'm gathering there?
Yeah, I mean, we'd probably be under that number in 5 years, but that's would be in the ballpark.
Go ahead.
My recollection of some data that was shared with us earlier is kind of draft plans, proposed plans, dreams and aspirations, or whatever other term, is that the housing demand over the next decade, as I understood it, was an additional 24 to 2,800 homes. So that suggests to me that obviously the 5 years that you're talking about, we're going to need this future proofing kicked in. And Matt, if I may call you Matt, I think the last time you indicated to us, if we wait till then, the price tag was another 30 million. And if we did it now, it was 12 to 15. Have I understood that correctly?
That is correct. Yes. I mean, I'm crystal balling how things will change in the future, but yes, that, to wait 5 to 10 years is significantly, as you can see, even just through this year, we've seen significant increases. So yes, that would be an approximate ballpark of, the difference in cost.
Thank you both. Councillor Wheeldon.
So I just want to clarify what I'm hearing you say is that we can confidently say that if we were to try and future-proof faster by just building in this additional capacity now, we could confidently say that we'd be adding capacity for a few thousand more homes.
So I'm just trying to do the math in my head a little bit here of like how much that would take us to. I can certainly get back to you with more concrete numbers, but I think that would be a general, if we're going to go from 4,600 to 6,000, would certainly add significant amount of homes. Yeah.
1,400 by my quick math.
Yeah.
Or so.
Or so. Yeah.
Director Whiteman, you look like you want to say something.
Yes, to you, Mr. Mayor, and to the councillor. I think the staff report on I think that's coming up. We'll talk directly to the numbers, and the figures will be more accurate. So I don't know if what we've stated is absolutely correct, but there's figures that I know in my head, and Paul and I, but we want to confirm those numbers before we feel comfortable with them. They have to be accurate, and we don't want to mislead anybody.
And whatever we have in the report needs to be the same as we put in the application.
That's correct.
Right. I assume that staff, and I shouldn't, but that staff will bring a recommendation with regard to future proofing and next steps, or whether or not to move forward in the immediacy or wait. I'm suggesting we'll have that recommendation before council. CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Definitely will outline that, and we will go over what we've put in the application. And part of the discussion that we had with the consultant was to add that future proofing. If we're going to go at this a second time, we're going to go for the full 35 million, not the 28 that we went for before. So we might as well put these things in now and attempt to get the funding. And then once we bring all of that on board, we have looked at being able to stack some of the grant funding with anything that comes out from the feds. There's also a couple of other options provincially, and Linda is working on some numbers with our DC study to look at that future development and where we might be able to pay for that, any additional costs beyond what the application might generate for us. But we will outline that in the report.
Thank you. Look forward to that. Anything else, Councillor Freitas?
Perhaps a question a little out of left field, but looking at the sophistication of this system, one would have to presume there's a fairly robust network backing it up. And I guess my question is, we're going to need broadband internet to support this, and all that other good stuff. Is that incorporated in the plans?
One would hope so, since it's in the urban area.
Yeah, that is correct. So we have a full what we call a SCADA system. So I'm not going to get the acronym right, but basically it records all of the information that the plant uses, pump speeds, flows, everything, and it reports back to the operators. Logs all of the data. We've built into the administration building a SCADA room, so the operators will be able to go into there, have their computers in there, look at all the different operations of everything. It has a network access fully to the city's network as well as to the plant network as well. So it's fully integrated that way, as well as labs in there for the operators to do testing and all of that requirements from the ministry in terms of compliance and requirements for there.
Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor. Last time you were here, I asked why an administration building cost $3 million. And I was satisfied with your response, but then this time it costs almost half as much, or just over half as much as it did last time. And so I appreciate seeing some of the numbers go down, but I'm wondering, is there any loss of functionality with that?
No, so before we had taken the design was just strictly a concept, so it was just square footage times a cost that we're seeing in the industry. Now that we've had a chance to work with the municipality, we gave them a room diagram of what do they need in this. We worked out through all the details what exactly they need, so the cost estimates are much more refined down of what we're trying to do. So.
Not that I want to add anything to the cost, but is the admin building also future-proofed?
Yeah, I would say that there's a fair amount of space in there for additional operators and other aspects like that. Labs are more than large enough. We have multiple bathrooms, SCADA rooms, storage areas. There's a significant robustness to the administration building that could service this municipality for years to come, for sure.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair, thank you. Looking at your list on provisional scope, I see Headworks has gone to $4.5 million. And it's not an appealing number, but I think I was convinced by some folks prior to you that Headworks is kind of key to this whole thing. And it's perhaps an unfair question, but are we going to be able to contain it at that? Or is it going to ramp up on us dramatically again? That's my first question.
I would hope we would try and contain it, but again, we can't always control how these things happen. Like I said, we got updated quotes on the screens, which have now doubled. Unfortunately, we can't control that. So I would like to hope that we've contained it, but I don't want to sit here in front of council and promise anything necessarily. We don't have control over it. So we're doing our best. The longer we wait, obviously, the more costs tend to increase.
Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question or two about the septic receiving station. A significant increase in the cost as well. I have yet to understand the business plan behind having that. It seems like a lot of money for something that we may or may not be able to recover costs on. So I'm having issues with that one.
I'm anticipating that we'll see a business plan as part of the recommendations on the October 15th report, Director.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Mayor.
So we'll be able to see justification or not at that point.
Yes.
And we'll be able to make a decision around whether that's a component we want to include in this upgrade, change, whatever. Councillor Wheeldon.
Well, thank you. Usually when we see a quote, then we also get another quote after that, which includes contingency. And so I think the 28.8 million ended up coming out to about 41 million. What does 36.8 million come out to?
I think it shows a 15% contingency is included in that, Councillor Wheeldon.
That is correct. So we do have contingency on the 28.8 where we were carrying 25%. And now we're carrying 15. As we refine the design, we carry less contingency because we know more details. We've got more refined quotes from suppliers and things like that.
So the base number has gone up a lot, but the overall number has come down a little bit. Is that the gist?
I mean, the overall cost has gone up overall. Like I said, we're at 2836 versus the 28 or thereabouts. We have refined those costs down, but yes, the contingency has come down. But does that, I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
Well, I just remember seeing $41 million as a top end figure for what we were looking at all in, and I don't know where that comes from now.
Yeah, so that number actually included some operational costs when we were comparing, I think I know which number you're talking about. It was the option between option 1 and option 2. And that when we worked through those numbers, that included operational, so electricity costs and things like that, that we were rolling into that number to do a comparison of option 1, which was the aeration lagoon based system versus this more tank based, purpose built option.
Thank you both. Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair, thank you. Matt, I think the last time we talked, the plan was to take waste sludge and put it back in the existing aeration lagoon. That's still the case?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And I think I recall, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but you indicated we would probably have to dredge it every other year. And based on the last cost that we faced, which was about 600,000, one could anticipate this would be $1 million because of the larger aeration pond. Every 2 years, that adds significantly to ongoing operating costs. And I was wondering, has any more consideration been given to better managing the sludge? I know we talked about geotubes, and I recognize that there's some winter limitations to them, but sometimes moving frozen blocks of stuff to a field might be better than dealing with the mucky stuff. But I'm concerned about the ongoing operating costs of sludge management, which has been a large part of our problem up to now. Do you have any thoughts on how we address that?
Yeah, so we did look at the geotube option actually as part of one of our tech memos that we had completed previously. We did look at of adding geotube area in that the municipality could use to thicken the sludge, store it over a number of years, and then be able to truck it away that way. In consultation with local suppliers, and we did a bit of a cost analysis to determine what would be more cost effective. The capital cost to install the geotube system versus having somebody come in and dredge the smaller lagoon, the aeration lagoon, was more cost effective overall. Unfortunately, and was happy to share those tech memos and numbers with council. I'm sure I actually might have been part of the last package that we had put together. I will say, and I kind of say this to most of our clients, is unfortunately the byproduct of any wastewater treatment is solids. And, previously you've been putting it in the lagoons and you have a bit more buffer there to try and deal with it. But unfortunately, no matter what we do here, there's always going to be a byproduct of this solids, and it's how we manage that, how much storage you have. Again, that costs money to store it, bigger tanks, things like that. So, it's just, that's the nature of wastewater treatment, is there's going to be solids as a byproduct to this that the municipality is going to have to deal with on a yearly or bi-yearly basis.
Thank you both. Any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Wilden.
Thank you. So if we're looking at potentially adding in the future proofing to this design, and doing the whole thing, you had said an additional $12-ish million. So we'd be looking at more like 48 to 50.
Yeah, that's correct. If we were to build the new tanks on the side and put all the equipment in and do all of that stuff, then yes, that would be in the right ballpark. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from members of council? I have a motion moved by Councillor Wilden, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council received the presentation from J.L. Richards regarding the construction plan for Brighton wastewater treatment system upgrades. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. That brings us to question period. Is there anyone in the audience who has a question with anything on today's agenda, being the one item? Mr. Toby. Yeah, just come on. One of the engineers will give up their seat and you can introduce yourself for the record.
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy and I'm pleased to see sewage treatment moving along.
You have to introduce yourself, Steve. Sorry.
Sorry, Steve Toby Developments. We do some homes here. So these plants are important to us. They're important to municipality. I am the closest landowner as well too. So the logistics of the plant are important to me as well too. So I guess my question just to the engineering guys is maybe you could just explain to me. I'm coming in here a little bit late, but the logistics. So I know we flow in from the west across the field there by the big main. We have two pressure lines which basically plop into the same spot. We come into a very large pipe there, and we move basically by gravity into the first north pond, which is the aeration pond. Aeration happens. We get some clarification which happens there. We go from first pond to second pond coagulation, and we get sedimentation in the second pond from there and into the environmental pond to the south. So physically, the new process is a mechanical plant. Can you sort of explain when we leave the pipe now where we're going to go? We're going to have a head pump, obviously, and then we're going to move through the new plant, and then we're keeping the old pond, I gather, and then through the next pond. So maybe you can just bring me as we flow, like as a thing, how we get there.
Certainly. Maybe if you wanted to bring up go back a couple of slides there, if you can. A diagram might help visualize a little bit better as well. Go back a few slides.
Where it sits on the land.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that one right there is probably as good as. So as you can see here, like you were saying, the Harbor Street pumping station and the gravity pipe that flows through comes just to the bottom left corner of this figure here, and then it comes right now and comes kind of down the roadway, so just below that second pink area. It's kind of a roadway there, and goes into that aeration lagoon. Is in the north, yeah, it's in that corner there. So we're picking it up with a new influent pumping station, putting it through headworks, aeration, clarifiers, and disinfection.
So it's sitting where that existing foundation where they used to do.
Where they used to do the drying. Yeah, it's up in that area there. So we had to, I guess one of the things too that we had to do once we got the geotechnical report is where the rock was. So we tried to maximize the amount or how minimize cost and maximize the rock and how we use it, and less taking rock out because that's expensive. So we had to play with that a little bit. So that's why it ended up in that area. This is still, a meter above grade. So we pump up into here, flow through this UV, and then it drains by gravity from the UV down along the roadway between the two lagoons, and then comes across the south end of the larger lagoon and connects into that existing structure that outlets.
So you're getting rid of the aeration pond?
Yeah, so the aeration pond now becomes where we store all the solids. So we're going to repurpose that and put that as a solid storage area. And then the larger lagoon area right now under the current plan is to be used for equalization. So when high flows come, we can, once we reach the plant capacity, we can go out to there, put flows out to there. And then when the flows subside, because there's a lot of wet weather influence, we're able to bring that back through the plant during drier seasons. We're also going to use that to try and pump the liquid off the solid. So over time, we can let it settle, take the liquid, put it back through the plant, and get our solids content higher.
But when you leave the plant, via the UV would be your last process, correct?
That's correct.
You're
Yeah,
having straight pipe all the way to the south pond,
That-
south of County Road 64. pond.
that's right. Yeah.
So they just redid the road there this morning. Do you need to dig up the road?
No, so we're going to be on our, yeah, no. No, we were aware of that. Yes. No, we're going to be on our property on the south side of the actual facultative lagoon. So there's like a berm that runs along there. We're going to just be on the back side of that.
Only a developer who digs up our roads all the time would ask that question. Thank you both for that. If there's no one else, Wayne, do you have a question? There's no one on Zoom, I assume. Thank you. All right, everybody, that brings us to our confirmatory bylaw. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, second by Councillor Wheeldon, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton held on September 30th, 2024. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Fredis, that the September 30th, 2024 special council meeting adjourn at 5:45 PM. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate the update.